This model from the German Reichsbahn's V36 series is in TT gauge and was produced by the company called VEB Berliner TT-Bahn in the 1980s in the former GDR. The diesel locomotive model was available in a variety of colors. All locomotives are powered by their 3 sets of wheels. The length over the buffers is 82 millimeters. The original name of the locomotives in this series was WR 360 C14 because they were so-called Wehrmacht's diesel locomotives from the 1930s. A total of 279 locomotives were built between 1937 and 1950. Their type designation comes from the fact that they were indeed locomotives of the Wehrmacht for standard gauge. And standard gauge means Regelspur in German. Hence the abbreviation WR. They had 360 horsepower and a C-axle arrangement, that is 3 coupled drive axles, and an axle load of around 14 tons. With a length over the buffers of 9,200 millimeters and a surface weight of only 39 to 43 tons, depending on the model, they reach top speeds of up to 60 kilometers per hour. This series was particularly interesting because back then steam locomotives were the propulsion vehicles actually built and used at this time. However, these special locomotives were built for a very special purpose. They were purchased on one hand for various Wehrmacht locations where there was a risk of explosions, and on the other hand for military or even civilian locations where the steam coming from the steam locomotives may have revealed the exact locations, such as airports. Particularly during the Second World War, this series was used in large parts of Europe and even North Africa. After the end of the war, many locomotives of this series were still in the eastern and western zones of occupation, but some were also in France, Austria and Czechoslovakia, among others. In the western part of Germany, the well-preserved locomotives were refurbished and then redesignated into the V36 series, whereby there were 3 sub-series that differed, among other things, in terms of transmission. Some were diesel hydraulic, others diesel mechanical. Interestingly, there were still enough components available that additional 14 locomotives could be built immediately after the end of the war, namely in 1947-48. In what was then still the United Economic Area, 13 of the 14 locos went to the Deutsche Reichsbahn, to the eastern part of Germany. In 1950, another 18 new locos followed, which were then given to the German Federal Railway in the western part. However, those had newer transmissions and larger diesel tanks. Therefore, the war locomotives of this series were decommissioned relatively quickly. What's also interesting about this particular series is that, as mentioned, they were classified as the V36 series both in Western and Eastern Germany. However, they were later redesignated as Class 103 at the Deutsche Reichsbahn, so in the eastern part of Germany, but as Class 236 at the Bundesbahn in the western part. Ultimately, the last ones were phased out in both German states by the early to mid-1980s. Due to their stability and widespread use, numerous locomotives of this series are still alive today. For example, there is the V36-027. It became one of the traditional vehicles of the Deutsche Reichsbahn in 1983 and was only retired in the year 2001. Today, it belongs to the Mecklenburg Railway Friends in the city of Schwerin. Others are in the Weimar Railway Museum, the Darmstadt Railway Museum, or the Deutsche Bahn museums, so the museums of the German State Railway in Koblenz and Nuremberg. But the Historical Railway Frankfurt Museum has several of them, one of which is even operational.